I came back to my hometown believing it would be quiet. That was the lie I told myself when I accepted her invitation. A few days off, a familiar place, a traditional festival that hadn't changed in decades. No missions, no threats, no one watching. Just a man returning home. The town looked exactly the way I remembered it. The same narrow roads, the same wooden storefronts, the same sense that time had decided to slow down here, as if the outside world were optional. People smiled easily. They waved at strangers. They trusted the air around them. I used to think that was innocence. Now I knew better. The festival filled the main street with warm lights and old music. Food stalls lined the sidewalks. Children ran between adults carrying paper flags. Everyone seemed relaxed, present, unaware that danger doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it blends in. Sometimes it wears familiar faces. I spotted her before she saw me. She hadn't changed much. Maybe a little older, a little more careful in the way she stood. But the smile was still there, practiced and convincing. The kind you use when you don't want anyone asking questions. When our eyes met, she hesitated for half a second before walking toward me. Half a second too long. "You actually came," she said, laughing softly as if she hadn't doubted it. "Seem safer than staying away?" I replied. She smiled again, but her shoulders stayed tight. Her eyes scanned the crowd behind me before settling back on my face. That's when I knew something was wrong. Fear doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like politeness. Sometimes it looks like someone pretending they're fine because they don't know who's listening. We talked about small things at first, old memories, people we used to know, who had left town, who had stayed. She kept the conversation light, but her body told a different story. Her hands never stayed still. Her weight shifted constantly. She reacted to sounds before they happened. Someone said a name nearby, just one word, casual, almost thrown away. Her smile disappeared. It returned quickly, but not fast enough. I didn't ask her about it right away. I didn't need to. The truth was already there, pressing against the silence between us. She wasn't here to celebrate. She was here because she needed witnesses, noise, people, protection she couldn't admit she was looking for. Later that night, when the music grew louder and the crowd thinned just enough to create pockets of privacy, she finally spoke. "They want us to sell," she said quietly. "Who?" "You already know." I did. The name belonged to a local businessman. Wealthy. Respected. The kind of man people defended instinctively because he sponsored events and donated money and kept the town comfortable. The kind of man no one questioned out loud. "My family's land," she continued. "They've been coming by, talking, making offers, acting polite. And it wasn't a request." She finally looked at me then. Really looked. Her eyes were tired, not panicked, not hysterical, just exhausted. "They don't like that we won't sell," she said. "They don't like that our production is smaller but better. It makes them look weak." I listened without interrupting. That was part of my training. Let people reveal themselves in their own words. "They've been watching us," she went on. "People standing too close. Cars slowing down near the house, conversations that stop when I enter a room." I asked the only question that mattered. "Have they threatened you directly?" She hesitated. "That's not how they work," she said. That was answer enough. The next morning, the visitors arrived. 2 men, clean clothes, calm posture, professional eyes that didn't match the setting. They introduced themselves politely and asked to speak with her. I stepped forward before she could answer. "Not today," I said. They smiled, but their eyes hardened. One of them took a step closer, just enough to test boundaries. "We'll make it quick." "No," I replied. "You won't." They didn't expect resistance, especially not from someone they assumed was just passing through. That assumption cost them. The confrontation was fast, controlled, quiet enough that no one down the road noticed anything more than raised voices. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't escalate it. I simply ended it. They left angry, bruised, not defeated. That night I knew it wouldn't stop there. For the next 2 days, pressure built from all sides. Vehicles parked where they shouldn't. Men watching from distances they thought were safe. Messages delivered through intermediaries. Warnings disguised as concern. Each time I responded, not emotionally, not recklessly, professionally. I neutralized threats before they could become violence. I kept the situation contained. But with each encounter, something felt off. The reactions were too predictable, the timing too convenient, almost as if every move had been anticipated. I ignored the feeling. That was my second mistake. On the third night, after another encounter that ended with their men retreating, I made a decision. I was done reacting. I was going to the source. I didn't tell her where I was going. That was intentional. The more she knew, the more variables I introduced. And at that point, I wasn't fully certain who was playing which role anymore. All I knew was that reacting wasn't working. Whoever was behind this was always a step ahead, nudging events instead of forcing them. That kind of control doesn't come from men who act emotionally. It comes from planners. The businessman's estate sat just outside town, far enough to feel isolated but close enough to remind everyone who owned what. It wasn't flashy. That alone made it dangerous. People who want attention build monuments. People who want power build silence. I approached after dark, not because I wanted secrecy, but because I wanted honesty. People reveal more of themselves when they think the world has gone quiet. The first line of defense was predictable. Cameras placed for deterrence, not coverage. Guards positioned to be seen, not to see. This wasn't a fortress, it was a statement. I dismantled the perimeter without drama. No unnecessary force, no panic. Each man went down believing he'd simply made a mistake. By the time I reached the house, there was no one left standing between me and the truth. Inside, the lights were on. He was waiting. The businessman sat at a long table with a glass of untouched whiskey in front of him. Calm. Too calm for someone who should have been alarmed. He didn't reach for a weapon, didn't call for help, didn't even stand. "You're early," he said. That was my first confirmation. I closed the distance slowly. Not threatening, not rushed. My intention was clear enough without words. The room carried the weight of everything that had happened over the last few days. The intimidation, the fear, the pressure he'd put on her family. Or so I thought. "I warned your men to stay away," I said. "You warned the wrong people," he replied. I stopped. Just for a moment. Not because I believed him, but because his voice carried no urgency, no desperation, no calculation to buy time. He spoke like someone stating a fact, not defending himself. "You think this is about land," he continued. "You think it's about production numbers and market control." I tightened my grip. That's what I was told. Of course it was. The room felt smaller suddenly, not because of him, because of the pattern forming in my head. Small inconsistencies I'd ignored began aligning. The predictability of the guards, the way pressure escalated but never crossed certain lines, the fact that every confrontation pushed me closer to this house. "You didn't come here by accident," he said, and neither did I. I forced him to stand. The intention was still there, the resolve, but something had shifted. Killing him no longer felt like resolution. It felt like punctuation placed in the wrong sentence. "Talk," I said. He did. He explained how the first contact wasn't his idea, how the refusal to sell hadn't angered him. It had intrigued him. Smaller production didn't threaten his business. It threatened someone else's. "She came to me first," he said. That name hit harder than I expected. "She told me her family was in danger," he went on, "that competitors were circling, that she needed pressure to look real, not protective. She needed to look like a victim." I shook my head. Not in denial, in calculation. "She wanted me to apply just enough force to draw attention," he said. "Not enough to destroy anything, just enough to provoke someone with your skill set." I stepped back without realizing it. She knew you'd come home, he continued. She knew you couldn't stand watching people you care about get pushed around. And she knew exactly how far to push without losing control. The realization didn't arrive all at once. It crept in, quiet and relentless. Every moment replayed differently now. Her tension, her fear that never escalated into panic. The way she always seemed to know when something was about to happen. You were the weapon, he said calmly. I was the target. Silence filled the room. For a moment I considered finishing it anyway. Ending him would still feel justified on paper. But that was the trap. The clean narrative. The simple ending. I didn't fall for it. Instead, I did something neither of them expected. I called the authorities. I laid everything out. Every encounter. Every name. Every escalation. I stepped back and let the structure I trusted do what it was built to do. She was arrested that same night. I didn't see her until the next day. The room was small, neutral, designed to remove emotion from conversation. She looked at me the way she always had, searching, familiar, wounded. I don't understand, she said. I know, I replied. That was the truth. I didn't explain, didn't accuse, didn't argue. I told her only one thing before I left. I did what needed to be done. She cried after I turned away. I heard it. I didn't stop. A week passed. I stayed away from everyone. From the town. From the narrative people were already rewriting. That's how it always goes. Silence gets filled whether you participate or not. Then the call came. Federal. Coordinated. Larger than anything I'd imagined. A task force moved in on the businessman's estate. This time, it wasn't quiet. This time, it was public. Evidence surfaced linking him to organized crime far beyond the town. Money laundering, coercion. Networks she'd never mentioned. He hadn't been the villain. He'd been the shield. I returned to see her one last time. She was different. Stripped of certainty. Stripped of control. You're free, I said. She stared at me, confused. They were coming for you, I continued. Not him. The only way to keep you alive was to make you look untouchable, unpredictable, public. The truth settled slowly. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She understood. I didn't expect forgiveness. That wasn't why I came back. When I returned to see her again, it wasn't out of relief or romance or a sense that everything had turned out well. It was because unfinished things don't disappear just because the danger does. They stay lodged somewhere between memory and responsibility. She was sitting near the window when I arrived, the same way she used to sit years ago, watching instead of participating. The town outside looked unchanged. Same streets, same houses, same illusion of safety. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, internally, as if the certainty she once carried had been stripped away layer by layer. They said I could go, she said quietly, that everything was dropped. They didn't drop it, I replied. They finished it. She nodded slowly, absorbing the weight behind the words. People like her were used to moving pieces, not being one. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she asked the question she'd been holding since the beginning. Was any of it real? I didn't answer right away. Truth isn't always a sentence. Sometimes it's an atmosphere, a pause, a look that doesn't avoid. Yes, I said finally. Some of it was. She exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and grief. I told her everything then. Not the version filtered through strategy or restraint. The real one. The one that explained why I had let her be arrested. Why I had walked away when she cried. Why I had allowed her to believe she had lost everything. The mafia had been watching the land for years. Not because of the crops, but because of the routes. The isolation, the lack of oversight. The kind of place where things could pass through unnoticed. She had been noticed long before she decided to act. If I had confronted them directly, If I had exposed them quietly, they would have removed her permanently. People like that don't forgive interference. They erase it. The only way to protect her was to make her visible, unstable, legally radioactive. I had needed her to look dangerous enough that no one wanted to touch her, and it worked. She listened without interrupting, without defending herself, without reaching for excuses. When I finished, she said something I hadn't expected. I thought I was the one in control. You were, I said, until you weren't. That was the truth we both had to accept. The days that followed were strange in the quietest way. The town adjusted to the absence of tension the way it always did, quickly, without reflection. People stopped whispering. The businessman's name was spoken differently now, less reverence, more distance. She stayed. I expected her to leave, to disappear the way people often do when their narratives collapse, but she didn't. She remained in the house her family had owned for generations, walking the land as if seeing it for the first time. I checked on her without making it obvious. Old habits die hard. She noticed. You don't have to keep doing that, she said one afternoon. I know, I replied, but you are. Yes. She smiled then. Not the controlled one from the festival. A real one. Brief. Honest. We didn't rush anything. That mattered more than either of us admitted. There had been enough manipulation, enough urgency, enough pressure disguised as necessity. What formed between us after that wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. We talked in the evenings, about the town, about the lives we didn't live, about the versions of ourselves that had diverged somewhere in the past and collided again under the worst possible circumstances. She didn't ask me to stay. I didn't ask her to leave. One night, sitting on the porch as the air cooled and the sounds of insects filled the space between words, she asked, "Do you regret coming back?" I considered it carefully. No, I said, but I regret believing I could stay detached. She nodded, understanding more than I said. I used you, she admitted. I knew exactly what I was doing. I know. You could have killed him. I almost did. She looked at me then, really looked, as if seeing the weight of that choice for the first time. Why didn't you? Because killing him would have finished the story you wanted, I said, not the one that needed to be told. She absorbed that in silence. The next morning, I told her I was leaving. Not permanently, not dramatically, just returning to the life I had paused. She didn't protest. She walked me to the edge of the property, where the land opened into fields that stretched farther than most people ever looked. I don't know what we are, she said. Neither do I. She hesitated, then said, but I know what I don't want to be. So do I. That was enough. We didn't kiss then. Not because we didn't want to. Because some things carry more weight when they're chosen without urgency. A week later, she came to see me. Not invited, not expected. She stood in the doorway of the place I was staying and said, I figured if we were going to do this, we should do it honestly. I smiled at that. What does that look like to you? No lies, she said. No rescue fantasies, no pretending we didn't hurt people. I stepped aside and let her in. That was the beginning, not a fairy tale, not redemption, just two people choosing to stop manipulating outcomes and start accepting consequences together. We didn't fix each other. We didn't erase the past. We simply stopped running from it. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough.
So, that's the end of this story, but there are plenty of other great ones right here. Before you go, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that little bell.